When it comes to religion, the Caribbean is dominated by Christianity. However, many different sects and cultural adaptations of Christianity can be found throughout the islands. From the religions of slaves and indentured servants, the styles developed on the islands themselves. When the Europeans came to the Caribbean in the 15th century, they brought their own religions with them. The Spanish and French were devout Roman Catholics, while the British were Protestants. The region's religions became even more mixed when the islands were claimed by different nations, as they often were throughout the Caribbean's early history. But religious diversity exists even on the islands that rarely or never changed hands. Slavery and indentured servitude brought many people with many different faiths to the islands. African syncretic religions came to the New World with the enslaved Africans. However, their indigenous religious practices were outlawed during colonial enslavement and labeled as pagan and barbaric. Africans, in an effort to avoid punishment as well as to maintain connection to the spirit world, adapted to the New World regime by synchronizing their traditional indigenous beliefs with elements of Christianity. In doing so, they helped to retain some elements of their ancestral religious practices. Variations of African syncretic religious beliefs emerged throughout the Caribbean. However, they held general similarities. Some of these African syncretic religions includes Voodoo, which is widely practiced in Haiti, Kumina, which was brought to Jamaica by free Africans, Pocomania, and Revivalism, which came out of the Great Revival. Religion establishes and maintains social control in a number of ways. From the earliest civilizations, man has used religion to aid in ruling his subjects either in the form as a spokesman or as a god. In later years, religion is more greatly used as a political tool wielded by the church or by reformers. In each of these ways, religion is used as a tool to sway, convert, and control the people who are subject to it. Religion in the Caribbean is an enduring institution and an integral part of our culturescape. Besides the ways it enriches the spiritual lives of religious people, it creates social spaces for communal fellowship and where useful friendships are formed. Religion has also historically operated as a mobilizing force against oppression. The British Caribbean before emancipation has been described as a barbarian community. The plantocracy in the various territories made no serious attempts to establish permanent institution of any kind and made no systematic provision of education for the children of any social group during the slavery period. During slavery, there has been no formal provision of education for the slaves, except perhaps for that offered by nonconformist missionaries towards the ends of the period. In the 17th and 18th centuries, wealthy planters had bequeathed property and funds to establish foundations to educate poor white children and coloreds who could be classified as white. The emancipation of slave children under 6 years of age in 1834 and full emancipation in 1838 provided the first opportunity for and a major stimulus to the establishment of an education system for the working class in the British Caribbean. Slave masters had tended to hold the view that formal education would make the slaves unfit for, or at the very least, disinclined to perform manual labor. The reforming government in England held the contrasting view that the peace and prosperity of the empire was closely related to the education of the subject peoples. The provision of elementary education was therefore a direct response to a perceived need for social control of the emancipated slaves. The education to be provided was to be Christian education. Accordingly, financial provision was made in the Emancipation Act of 1833 for the religious and moral education of the Negro population to be emancipated. These funds, known as the Negro Education Grant, were allocated to the missionary bodies who were already involved in the religious and moral upliftment of the slaves, and to the Michael Trust. However, after the abolition of slavery, over the years, education has become more accessible to the Negro population. Today, they can be seen in colleges and universities, pursuing all kinds of profession, and have been educators themselves. During slavery, many families were separated. Fathers, mothers, and children were attached to different plantations, with the result that some never saw their family members again. The responsibilities of bringing up the children rested primarily with the mothers and grandmothers. This situation gave rise to the matriarchal type of family, which is still common in the Caribbean today. Under the system of slavery, African men and women were not allowed to be legally married. All their rights were taken away, and they were forced to abide by the injustices of the Europeans who owned them. Marriage was never the right African could have. As a result, African men and women faced two choices. They either lived together and had children without being legally married, or even merely visited the women on occasions over a period of time. In the period following emancipation, the black people of the Caribbean worked out their own patterns of family life and relationships. To some extent, these patterns were inherited from slavery but modified to suit actual living conditions after slavery was over. Most working-class African families, however, were headed either by a couple living together who had never married in church, which is common now, or by a woman whose house was home for her children, which is visiting union. The children born of both unions were, and to some extent are still, considered illegitimate according to law. It is important to note that no one considered children illegitimate if they were born of a couple who lived together like man and wife, even if they had never married in church. This continues today, as children of common law unions are now recognized by law. Legislation now allows for even the woman in this situation to receive benefits if her partner dies. Family life was very important among African people in the past, and they cared deeply about family ties and responsibilities. Children were always wanted, even when a family was very poor. Today, we see elements of this as poor African-descended couples long for children to complete their family life. Discipline was and continues to be stressed in all aspects of the family. While small children are fussed over, as they get older, they may receive floggings or beatings to enforce structure. Being a majority in the Caribbean, African Caribbean families have significantly influenced the culture and political climate of the region. For instance, the celebration of Carnival in Trinidad and Tobago, the introduction of reggae and calypso, and the invention of the steel pan all originated in African Caribbean families. In addition, most of the political leaders are from an African background. It is also evident that African Caribbean families have shaped the history of the region in significant ways.